Good morning and welcome to the Kickstart. Today is July 26th. Hope everyone had a extremely awesome weekend. We will get this thing going as soon as we get through the countdown. All right. Good morning. Welcome to the Kickstart. It is great to be with you today. My name is Harlan Pickett. I am president of Eagle Care Health Solutions. Every Monday, I get together with you, share my insights on what the latest news stories are in our industry, kind of just get you started for the week, let you know what's going on so you can better serve yourself and better serve your clients. All right, let's jump right into this thing. Got a pretty big story here. You may wonder why it applies to you as a insurance professional, but this is actually a very big deal. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota was sued a few months ago by the Department of Labor for not fulfilling their ERISA fiduciary duty. Now, this is a big deal because in most cases where any time a insurance company has faced the fiduciary duty label, they have been able to kind of skirt that. But this is a little bit different situation. And in fact, what this has really done is this lawsuit is being allowed to move forward is what is actually happened. There hasn't been a determination or anything at this point in time. But Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota just wanted it dismissed, saying it was completely unfounded. But a federal judge now has said, no, the Department of Labor can continue to move forward. So to give you an idea of what's going on here, because this is why it's a big deal to us in this industry, is because what the Department of Labor is accusing Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota of doing is incorrectly imposing a state provider tax to self-funded plan customers. So in this case, they were either the plan administrator or they were just the plan administrator or they were the plan provider, and for these self-funded plans. Okay. And so they're saying because they were incorrectly imposing this state provider tax on these self-funded customers, it's violating the fiduciary duties under ERISA. So a little bit of context on what this tax actually is. The state of Minnesota imposes a tax on the gross revenue of hospitals, surgical centers, healthcare providers, anyone like that. All the payments that are coming from patients, they impose a tax on that. It's less than 2%. It's like 1.5, 1.8, something along those lines. But this tax is what funds their Minnesota Care or their Medicaid, as it were. So just think of it as the Minnesota Medicaid. Well, what the Department of Labor is alleging that Blue Cross did is they secretly passed this the tax on to the self-funded employer plans as part of the negotiated rates to their providers. So they're increasing the cost to these self-funded plans in essence by saying, okay, well, the provider is going to pay this much of a tax for these services, so we're going to add this in here, thus in essence paying the provider back for the tax that they are going to have to pay. All right. So I'm telling you, this is one of those crazy deals, right? So here is what the actual lawsuit says. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota for years has unilaterally caused the self-funded health benefit plans for which it serves as third-party administrator to compensate Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota in-network providers for amounts they owe under, that the providers owe, not Blue Cross, providers owe under the Minnesota provider tax. These amounts the providers never billed are passed on to the plans. Okay, this is the key. They weren't asking them to do this, they were just doing it. So this was without the authority to do something. Okay, and we all love this, right? This is the document. Without the authority to do so under the plan's governing documents. If it's not in the document, all of you folks out there in compliance, right? If it's not in the document, you can't do it. all without the authority to do so under the plan's government document. So this is the crux of it, and that is that it was not in the document. The employers had no idea it was happening, and whenever it was found out, they're like, "Oh, well, we can do it. We have the authority to do it." But where and how did you get it? So the lawsuit, although states that between 2016 and 2020, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Malaysia collected at least $66.8 million from self-funded plans under the provider tax. So these are fees that were paid out by these employers that were not legitimate, technically, that they were not in the plan document. The employers had no idea that they were paying them. The employees are paying more for their health plan because of this. So there's a lot to unwrap here. It'll be very interesting to see how this plays out. It's kind of been in limbo for a little while as we were waiting to hear whether or not it was going to be able to move forward. Because once again, these plans over and over and over say we're not fiduciary. But I think in this case, one of the things that kind of sets it apart is they were doing something that was not in the plan document. So we shall see what we shall see, but I think it's very interesting to keep a pulse on what's going on with this particular situation, because it could have a wide range impact across the board on self-funded plans. All right, we're going to jump right into another story about GLP-1s. Once again, not shocking. It seems like we hit on this subject almost every week that something new is coming on. The Business Group on Health recently did a survey. It was published actually last week on August. It was published here recently. I didn't get the exact date, but it showed that 67% of the employers that they represent. Now, this is a huge group because the Business Group on Health represents just large employers, and we're talking about 125 large employers with over 17 million employees. So, pretty strong group of employers that they're representing. And 67% of those employers are actually right now covering GLP-1s just to treat obesity. Okay, so we're talking about your Zepbound or Wegovy right now that is just to treat obesity. But 50% of those, this is what's pretty amazing here. 50% of those, I'll break that down for you. 20% of the employee survey said they would implement immediately. So right now they're going to. 20% said they're going to limit or be reducing coverage for GLP-1s, and another 30% said they would strongly consider doing so. So we're talking about a huge number of these big employers that are considering or going to take action on the GLP-1s because of the crazy cost that it's adding into everything. These employers, part of this was the survey that they done with these employers showed that they are projecting that their healthcare costs are going to raise almost 8% in 2025. And for this group of people, for this group of employers, now remember, we're talking about some big guys here. For this group of employees, that's the largest increase in a decade. So that's pretty significant, and they're not dumb. They're figuring out where this stuff is coming from, and they're clearly seeing that some of this is coming from that particular place where it's being just used for obesity. Now, on to really kind of put the other side of that down, 97% of these same employers already cover GLP-1s to treat diabetes, and there is no indication there's going to be any change in that. They're not really concerned about that. Obviously, the costs are the same regardless of which way you're going here, but they're looking at it with the obesity side. Of course, what we see is a really poor adherence to when you're supposed to be taking the medications, and the fact that a lot of people are not doing any of the other things that they need to do to really get the true benefits from these medications. When someone does, they're obviously seeing much better results, but you're paying a lot of money out of pocket and not getting the results you could get if people were giving a little bit stronger adherence. So it'll be, once again, interesting to see what happens in the future in this, because you have 125 employers that are representing or that have 17 million of employees there. That's a huge bulk of the people that are getting their insurance from their companies. And because of that, we're going to see, while it kind of is dropping the bucket, I mean, at the same time, that's a big number, 17 million. Someone's going to pay attention to the way employers are treating that in this case. So I think we're certainly going to see some changes there. Now, this next subject is something that I have talked about for years, and as soon as it hit during COVID, whenever they were making all the different changes, and then we had the American Rescue Plan Act, and they kicked up how much that they were doing on subsidies. I have said for years that this was going to have the type of impact that it has had and will continue to have if this is allowed to keep going. And once again, I think Congress is probably going to lean this way. Once you get people on a plan like this, it's really difficult for them to come off. But this analysis was actually done by the Congressional Budget Office. It's a nonpartisan group that really shows the financial impact of different bills and laws. Some of the bills, of course, that before they would ever become law, it kind of gives you an idea of what the impact would be. But this particular analysis looked at maintaining the current premium status levels. So this is what occurred during the COVID-inspired. This is an artifact. These higher subsidies are an artifact from the COVID-inspired American Rescue Plan Act. And if we just kept those permanently, which is, there's a big push for that. If you do that, then you're going to have more people that stay course towards ACA plans because of this. And you're going to have more companies that do not offer, especially smaller companies that do not offer health plans because of that. We already see that impact right now on the group space, because especially in lower income, if people in jobs are making less than 60,000, then they're typically going to get a pretty decent tax credit, and they may be better off on that side. Well, why is an employer going to waste money on offering a plan? It's very difficult for them to look at it that way. So a couple of interesting notes that they had from this analysis, and that was the premium tax credit reduces employers' incentive to offer health insurance to attract and retain workers. And that is true. I mean, the reason that you're offering those benefits in many cases, I mean, obviously a lot of folks care about their employees, but the reason you're offering those benefits in many cases is to attract and retain workers. But what if it does the opposite? What if because of the level that you are paying people, they're actually better off by getting an ACA plan? I am not a fan of ACA plans, by the way. I think that most of them, and maybe it's because of where I'm at here in Texas, our plans are junk, and it's hard for me to recommend one of those. Although I have lots of ACA clients, the plans themselves overall are not that great. Because of that, I have a hard time getting an employer to go that direction. But when you look at it financially, a lot of times it just makes sense. And that is the underlying problem, right? When you look at that, that's what you've got to, especially think about, your brand new businesses, you're starting your small or newly formed organizations. I mean, that's the last thing they want to be able to have to do is go through and try to find money for health benefits. So it's an interesting place to find themselves at. As far as how does it affect the budget, as it were, I don't think the government doesn't care too much about that. It doesn't seem like they don't care if they keep going into the hole. If they keep the current premium tax subsidies, it would add another 335 billion. Yep, that's with a B. 335 billion to the federal budget deficit over the next 10 years, from 2025 to 2035. To give you an idea of how many people are taking advantage of it, almost 7 million people would be taking advantage of it, is what they anticipate, and that's almost $5,000 per person is what that equates to. So, we'll see what we see on that deal. I think there's some good and bad to it. I think it certainly can help employers in many cases. But I mean, there's the whole ICRA side of this that is not affected by the subsidies, but also puts people on the marketplace. And I think we're going to see a little more rise to ICRAs too in certain places where it makes sense. So anyway, kind of just a little side note, because we're getting close to open enrollment again, and this is a big deal. All right. All right. Is 74 the new 65? What the heck does he mean by that? Is 74 the new 65? Well, people are retiring later, or at least they believe they're going to have to retire later. And that's what this is all about. A new study by the Equitable of about 1,000 consumers shows that while the majority want to retire at 65, almost half of them, 47%, say that it's unrealistic and most likely they will retire almost a decade later, near the age of 74, because that is actually a more attainable goal to reach retirement. Some of the reasons people say are inflation, diminished trust in traditional safeguards, obviously with the prices of things going up, and many folks not having pensions anymore. There's that's some of your traditional retirement things, and they're gone. So those are playing a huge role in the new attitude. But I think that is that's kind of sad to think about it that way. Is that's the number we've always heard, right? 65, 65, 65. But that's changing. There's no doubt about it, and it's been changing for a while. It's nothing new. Another, I think, key point that I wanted to bring out about this is the survey also revealed that more than half of the folks in the survey, more than half of Americans, 57%, view the current economic conditions in the U.S. as highly volatile. Now, that's not surprising, but once again, we keep being told that the economy is doing good, but I'm not seeing it. And obviously the folks in this study weren't seeing it either as a general rule, because you don't say something's highly volatile if it's doing well. The top financial challenges or obstacles people are having, and see that, is, of course, the increased living expenses. Inflation's eating everybody up. I mean, you look at the price of what you're paying for groceries now compared to what you're paying before. The fear of not having enough money saved. I mean, most folks don't even have $1,000 in the bank. And if you had something catastrophic happen, you're in bad shape. So you think about retirement, and if I don't even have $1,000 saved right now for that, how much am I putting in towards retirement? And is that suffering as well? A lot of times that's the case. One of the things that I just mentioned a moment ago, the lack of guaranteed income for retirement. If all you have is Social Security, and unfortunately, I know a lot of folks out there that's all they've got is Social Security. If you don't have a pension, and you haven't put anything away in a 401k, and you don't have any of that, man, you could be in a bad situation, and retirement may not even be in the cards. And of course, anticipated medical expenses. Think about that for a second. Anticipated medical expenses are a big, big deal. So as you get older, as you have these more things to think about, it can be a pretty big deal. So those are just a few of the things that folks were talking about. Once again, we typically post all this stuff out there for you to go and find the link if you'd like to read some of the articles that we found as well. All right, folks, hope everyone has a super blessed week. We will take next week off because it is it's Labor Day. So we will not be having an event next week, but I hope everyone has an extremely blessed week. Take care, and we'll catch you here in a couple of weeks. Hey, quick note, if you're still with us, we are having a Why Does Healthcare Suck tomorrow. We're talking about men's health with Dr. P. So y'all check that out, 2 p.m. tomorrow, 2 p.m. Central Time tomorrow, right here on any of the platforms you're watching today. All right, everyone have a super awesome week. We'll catch you next time. We're out of here.